Azure Storage is another core product of Azure. Azure Storage is used to store files, messages, and tables. It is massively scalable, is durable and highly available, as well as incredibly secure. And it supports 3 types of data. It will support structured data, semi-structured data, and unstructured data. Before we get into the specific services, we should review those 3 data structures. Structured data has a schema, is incredibly rigid, as you can see from my graphic here. It supports relational data. It uses keys to relate a row in one table to a row in another table. And this will be very familiar to you if you use databases, because that is the typical usage for structured data. Azure Storage will also support semi-structured data, which uses an ad hoc schema, and it has a non-relational format. You may also hear semi-structured data also referred to as NoSQL data. It uses tag for data location instead of mapping rows and columns. And typical usage for semi-structured data include a tab delimited files, CSV files, as in my example here, XML and JSON files. Unstructured data is probably the data type that we're most familiar with. Unstructured data does not have a schema or data structure. We can store PDFs, docs, JPEGs, and AVI files, as well as other file types. Now that we understand the 3 types of data structures, let's talk about the storage types in Azure. And there are 4 of them. There's blob storage, disk storage, file storage, and archive storage. Let's explore each of these in a little bit more detail, starting off with blob storage. And just from the graphics, you're probably going, wait, I know what kind of data structure this supports. Blob storage is used for unstructured data, as we can see just from our examples here. It is highly scalable, and Microsoft does recommend blob storage for most of your Azure scenarios. Common uses for blob storage include streaming audio and video, storing backups. You can use it for images and storing documents as well. Next, we have disk storage, which provides persistent storage for Azure virtual machines. And when you think about Azure virtual machines, you should immediately think disk storage. And persistent means that it's always available. There are 2 types of disk storage. There is the operating system disk storage and data disk storage. Microsoft highly recommends that you attach a data disk to your Azure virtual machine for storing data. When you create an Azure virtual machine, you will have 2 disks, the operating system disk and a temporary disk. Never, ever save anything to that temp disk, as it will be deleted. You must attach a data disk to your Azure virtual machine in order to save your data. Here's a screenshot from an Azure virtual machine. As you can see, we have our OS disk, and it has a name. And you can see we have a data disk that's been called data. OS disks are created when you create the virtual machine. Creating a data disk is optional. Next, we have file storage, which happens to be one of my favorite things in Azure. File storage is our file share in the cloud. We can access that file share in the cloud using Server Message Block Protocol, or SMB. If you see SMB and storage, always think file storage. When we use file storage, we can actually mount those shares to a system providing direct access to the files in the cloud from anywhere at any time. And that system can be a virtual machine or it could be on your laptop. And Azure File Storage will support multiple connections. Let's take a look at how we build out Azure File Storage in Azure. It starts off with a storage account. Once that storage account is created, we can then create our shares. In my example here, I have 2 shares. I have an admin share and a media share. Within our shares, we create our directories. For admin, we have tools, and for media, we have movies and pics. Within the directories, we can then store our files. This probably looks very familiar because this is exactly how we build out our file structure on our desktops and laptops. And finally, the last type of storage we have is archive storage. We use archive storage to store data that is required in, such as long-term backups. And this data is stored offline, therefore it's not easily accessible. Because of this, it has low storage costs, But if you need to go and pull that data, it does have the highest costs. It also has a high latency for retrieval because the data is stored offline. If you're going to use archive storage, Microsoft recommends data that can be archived for at least 180 days be stored in archive storage. You should now be familiar with the 3 types of data structures, as well as the 4 core storage service options available to you in Azure.